because I have a very interesting guest that I'll be talking with this morning. Her name is Heather Neff, and I'm going to read a brief intro about Heather. She's the founder and CEO of Equivalent Design. She's a global leader in accessible design, specifically scalable vector graphics, SVGs, that are lightweight, fast loading, and user-friendly. This is a game changer, helping companies decrease their digital carbon footprint while also being accessible to people with disabilities. Not only is Heather a leader in accessibility, but she's also an advocate for disability inclusion, gender equality, and LGBTQ plus representation in technology. Heather is going to be publishing a book called Equity Through Graphics to help content creators create accessible design for wider audiences. Thank you for joining me this morning, Heather. And how are you doing? Have you survived the holidays?
Yes, so we just got off the holiday. Happy New Year to everyone. It's 2023, and so it's been a very exhausting couple weeks, but it's exciting to be here and an honor to be here today. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm really glad you're here with me today. So I'm just going to hop on the first question for you today, and that is, what propelled you to start your company, Equivalent Design? Prior to this, you worked in marketing and e-commerce and independently as an inclusive brand expert. So this is like a natural segue to what you're doing now. So what encouraged this change?
Well, I have been in the web development graphic space since the year 2000, so going on 23 years this year. So it's been a long career in the field of both graphic design and web development. And in 2017, I started my own design firm focusing on inclusive branding and really getting into running the business. And my husband joined me, and he's also a high-end programmer, does HTML, CSS. And we were working with a team of people, and I wound up tearing a ligament in my chest, in my right arm here, which became worse with pain. So now it really actually hurts me to mouse and to type. And because I kind of lost the ability to do a lot of the graphic design, because it was a lot more work on when you're using a mouse, I was able to then hire more staff to support us. But after a while, it became pretty obvious that I couldn't use my arms very much anymore. So I started looking into trying to find different devices, different types of mice to help me use the computer with my voice and to not necessarily have to use my right arm anymore, which transitioned into the accessibility community and finding everyone and being like, oh my God, this is a huge industry here. What I also noticed when I was part of the community as someone who was disabled and joining it was that there was this huge need for people who knew how to make accessible graphics and accessible graphic design specifically. So I thought, why don't I rebrand my company? Why don't I just take it to the next level and become the first accessible graphic design firm here in the United States, take my team and learn new skills and really upgrade what we were working on. And during that time period, I took some courses and I happened to stumble across that we could do take these scalable vector graphics or SVG files, which we had already been using. They've been around since 1999. Many companies already utilize them on their websites, usually as a logo, because they do expand and scale as a scalable vector graphic indefinitely and stay crisp and clear on any device. So since as a branding expert, we're already using a lot of SVG logos, we already knew about that type of format. And that's where we saw that we could take some of the code that's being generated from Illustrator and take that code and do some really cool things with it. So it's snowballing into having become a startup, and now we're really a technology firm really focusing on making graphics from code.
That's really interesting. So it's interesting that from an injury that you sustained in your shoulder, that you were able to rebrand and offer a service that really many businesses need, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all businesses need smart SVGs. And
yeah, Yeah. So when I was looking around, I noticed that I needed to learn more and more. Like I realized that I had not been making my graphics accessible for a long time. They had been good, but not necessarily always meeting contrast ratios. So I learned all about the IAAP and their CPAC certification. And I was going through all of this training and learning and every seminar and every conference. And this is where I really realized that there's a big need for someone to teach accessible graphic design. So we've written a book called Equity Through Graphics, which we're publishing hopefully in a few more months. We'll keep adding more goodies to it and keeping expanding it. But it is something that's going to be really powerful for all graphic designers and other web developers to see some of the not so obvious best practices. A lot of people focus on WCAG, or the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, but there's so much more to that than just meeting the basic laws. You need to go above and beyond and think about colorblind users or dyslexic users, or how do you design for different cognitive issues? So we've been studying and really putting a guide together for other designers to learn a lot of these best practices, which is going to be really important for all designers around the world to start really incorporating from the very beginning. Something like 6-7% of all the accessibility issues starts in the design phase, right? Designers are responsible for all the marketing materials, anything that usually is in the branding or on your website, emails, everything comes back down to the designers and the branding. So it's one of those things where I'm encouraging companies to start taking a look and auditing their own marketing materials and even their own brand to incorporate some of the new technologies that we're working on.
Yeah. When is the book coming out, Heather?
Well, that's a good question. I keep saying it's going to be a couple more months, but we keep adding more things to it. So as we evolve our own technologies, the scalable vector graphics, we have a big chapter in there that we're trying to really tag team with the fact that we have a licensing agreement for all of our codes and everything we've done in another book. We have a developers that we've written as well. We're trying to wrap all of this information up so that people can purchase everything that we figured out, because it's really complex. It's actually quite tricky to do, and you kind of need a team to do it, because you need to have people who know Adobe Illustrator or another type of vector program, all the way through to our automated systems to test it, because we're testing these graphic files to announce correctly on all the different assistive technologies such as screen readers. So the testing is a lot of different, we have 4 different browsers, the different phones, and then a whole bunch of different software for the screen reader software itself.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of information that's going to be very helpful for designers and web developers. I'm just thinking of SVGs. Can you add them after into the design process, although you didn't add it in the beginning when you're designing your website? Can you add them later?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that's nice about them is that once you clean up the code that is exported from Illustrator, you can add these SVGs into your website just like you normally would with any other image. It's just as simple as replacing the ones you have. One of the bigger barriers that we find is that we really promote dark mode. Again, that gets into the digital sustainability side of the conversation, but dark mode is actually something that's extremely important for low vision users. So I myself have a really bad photophobia or fear of light. And so I need to have dark mode installed on all of my devices. And I really, really have a painful effect if I go to a white, bright website. And I've talked to many other low vision users as well, and people who just prefer it. In fact, something to the effect of 82% of people prefer to be in dark mode, which is a lot of the population. This is billions of users who prefer dark mode. And one of the bigger barriers of our technologies is that we have graphics that flip from light mode to dark mode and just ping your computer and say, what are your accessibility settings, including something called contrast themes. So our graphics just listen to whatever your preferences are and change into those preferences, including whatever colors you might have chosen. So right now we're really focusing on making sure that companies realize that people do their own accessibility settings, and our graphics will respond to those OS settings, which is really unique and actually very exciting, because this is going to make the most accessible user experiences. They're also code, so they load instantly, which is another part of the digital sustainability, since it uses a lot less bandwidth And it's one of those things where you don't also have to replace different images, because our SVGs will not only change into dark mode or custom colors, but they also will reformat themselves on mobile and give you an entire different experience with the same file. So one file equals about 6 different images right now, which is really great for, not only saving space, online, but also just load times or instant, which is really exciting because of the fact that they offer up all these different amazing experiences, but it's free for the end user. So there's no downloads or upgrades. As soon as you put these images on your website, they just work, and they work right now with today's technologies on all the different screen readers, so that users can have a much more really accessible and good user experience. And there's so much more about these graphics that I would love to go on about, because we're getting into some really cool cutting edge technology as well.
That's fine. That's fine. You're already providing so much information. I know that some websites have an accessibility menu, like government websites and county websites, wherever you live. There's like an accessibility menu on the bottom of your website. Is that something that you work on too? Is that you can do different adjustments from the menu, whether it's color contrast, font size, being able to zoom in? Is that something that you think have?
So what is the actual question? What's the question?
Oh, about the accessibility menu on websites. Is that something that you think everyone should have on their website, an accessibility menu? Do you think it's necessary?
No, I think and then the community is very, very strongly opinionated about what's called an overlay. Sometimes you do see the little icon for accessibility that will pop up a menu that will have all these different accessibility choices. I am a big component of saying, do not put an overlay on it, because it does make a worse experience for a lot of people using screen readers. A lot of times they also utilize AI, which can actually have poor alternative descriptions, or what the image is about is being read aloud to a low vision user. If the AI doesn't do a very good job, it becomes a much worse experience for users. So we don't recommend using overlays at all. In fact, this is why we need to start at the design phase at the beginning, and so that all of your colors are thought about and made to make them compliant. Usually go above and beyond the compliance. They're so actually quite low, to say the least. In fact, I think the color contrast ratios for text are way too low. In fact, I think they should be 10:1 and not just 4.5:1 for some of the text requirements. So it is really important to think about not relying on somebody else's settings. And in fact, I believe most people don't know they could even change their own accessibility settings in the back end of their computer. It's surprising how many people are like, oh, I could put dark mode on my computer. Like, I do it on my phone, but didn't know I could do it on my OS system. So it's something that is an awareness issue, to make sure that people do realize that they have control over their devices to begin with, to compensate for people who are doing a poor job designing their apps and their websites.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we have an overwhelming use of AI technology now, that almost everyone is using AI, but especially avoid AI for fixing any accessibility issues, right?
Yeah, they claim it will make you 100% compliant, and it's only this little line of JavaScript. And the reality is, it's so much more than that. You want to make sure that you're doing a really good job for each image to be really thought about. What's the context of the image? Why is it even there? Is it descriptive, or is it in a way that makes the user have an experience that makes sense, right? So this is all very important to learn how to write a good alternative text. And AI has a lot of potential. We're actually talking about using AI within our files, since we would like to utilize translation services and offer a different audio experience for low vision users who are listening. Since we have a short description and a longer description they can hear in the back end of our images. Again, we have a little bit of different technology, so we can have unlimited characters, unlike alt text. And in the back end, what we're hoping to do is have AI translate a description which could be like for an infographic, could be multiple paragraphs being read out loud, and instead give them the option to listen to an audio experience, which would give more emotion. It would have an AI voice in their native tongue with the accents, and it would be a lot much, it would be better an experience for people who are low vision trying to hear something and understand it emotionally. So as an artist and someone who's a designer, my goal is to make sure that we're making an equivalent experience for people who are listening to the graphics as well as sighted users who can see everything. So we're kind of crossing over because we're making graphics with code. We actually have a lot of things that we're working on that is truly exciting that we think is going to be changing the front of the digital landscape.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot more advances in AI now. So I wanted to go on to the next part. For people who are unfamiliar with making smart SVGs that are accessible, can you expand on how you can do this for those of us who are not familiar with SVGs?
Yeah, so again, SVG stands for Scalable Vector Graphic, which means it's made from a vector-based program such as Adobe Illustrator. Regular images like JPEGs and PNGs are usually exported in that format, and they are in pixels, so they are little tiny dots of information. And if you, those have a certain resolution, so if you kind of enlarge them, they tend to get kind of grainy. Because we're working in a vector-based program, it's actually or math-based graphics. So everything is coordinates, and those coordinates determine the shapes and the sizes and the colors, the gradients, such as any logo or an infographic or an illustration. So the only thing that I think should be left in pixels is any type of photo that you have. So something that's not really math-based in the beginning, but any type of logo that's usually done in Illustrator is perfect for this type of smart SVG. I say smart SVG because a normal SVG doesn't have the special codes that we've developed to respond to the different media queries on your browser. So they don't do anything in dark mode. They don't respond. Our files are actually going to be programmed in a way to respond to reduced motion. So they can be animated, but they can also have the preference that someone doesn't want animation. And we'll make sure that we slow it down or kill it depending on request from their own system. So our graphics can be interactive. Again, they actually have some code built into them. We're making infographics right now with semantic HTML built into the infographics so that a low vision user or other keyboard users could navigate inside the graphic. Again, they can have unlimited characters. We can have metadata in the back end, so we can have keywords built into these files as well. They also have been compressed and optimized to about 10 kilobytes on average. They're tiny little file sizes. So because they're loading in a fraction of a second, they are just amazingly better than JPEGs and PNGs. So one of my favorite parts, of course, is that they know if you're in dark mode. So we designed to make sure that you have a dark mode version of your image. And that's really important, again, for people who are surfing in dark mode to stay in that mode and not have to have a website all of a sudden change back to white because you haven't installed the dark theme on your website. These are something simple that you could do right now anyway with your own website is say, hey, we need a dark theme. Why? 82% of people, prefer dark mode, and 64% of people actually think you should already have one and is expecting that to load. And that's something that a lot of people don't realize that they're missing a huge opportunity to make a more accessible experience, especially for low vision users who have sensitivity to light. And that's one of the reasons I have to wear sunglasses at night is that I have a real sensitivity to on traffic. So it is something that is the same thing with a monitor in dark mode. It really helps reduce that strain and pain. The other thing is that dark mode does save on average 28% energy consumption. And right now, with all the energy crisis that we have in the world, it would be a really good thing for people to realize that they could reduce their energy bills. And in fact, 63% of your battery life on your cell phone, it can save that much of your cell phone. It's an amazing thing to put your devices in dark mode to save a lot of energy, especially on your cell phone when you're traveling and so forth. You can save up to 63% of your battery life. So a lot of the dark mode conversation comes back to reducing your digital carbon footprint. By offering a dark mode theme on your website, it also helps reduced a lot of blue light that's coming from your screen and your monitor, which affects your eye health negatively. So we're really encouraging people to take a look at dark mode, to install a dark theme, and then look at our graphics that will serve up beautiful dark mode experiences, as well as that reform on mobile, which is really cool to have a graphic rearrange itself on the mobile device, as well as being in light mode, dark mode, or what's called contrast themes, where low vision and other users, or something like 56 million people, prefer to choose the colors that they use on their machines for their text in the background color. And our graphics will meet whatever color they've chosen for the text, so that they will really stand out, which is extremely helpful for low vision and blind users who can really, they need something that's really, really bright against a dark background so they can actually see it. So this is something that we're really excited to offer as the most sustainable and accessible graphics ever made.
That is so fascinating. Heather, I'm just fascinated by all this information you're sharing. You know how all marketers have their own set of brand colors? Now, is that something you work with? If they have these brand colors that are in pink, bright colors like pink, purple, neon even, are those something?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, that's a very good question. We start off with a brand audit because we want to turn your graphics into these smart SVGs. And during the brand auditing phase, we look at all of your colors, and we actually have to change those colors into hue, saturation, and lightness, which is a different type of file format. It's kind of like hex colors, but it is HSL. So that's one of the first things we do, is we have you convert those colors with us and adapt those into your official brand style guide. I will also have my team and myself look at your color choices, look at your font choices, and if there's something that's really inaccessible or does not make the legal requirements, we will flag it and help remediate anything within the brand. There's no real straightforward laws about using neon colors. In fact, it's part of someone's brand. That's fine. It's a matter of how do you use those colors and where. So it's something about how you design the website, the interfaces, to be accommodating to as many people as possible without hurting anyone, is the ultimate goal.
Right. But some people just love the colors. I know some people that they just love the bright pink. And one thing that really bothers me is that a lot more people are using the brand colors for closed captioning on the videos, and there's just flashing words in the brand colors.
Yeah.
It's so annoying. And then it's just a matter of, people think that regular closed captions, that you see on TV are boring and ugly, but they're there for a reason. They're not there to be, they're there to be functional and to be able to read what's being said on the screen. It's not meant to be part of anyone's branding for the company. It's a whole separate thing, and you should just leave it alone.
Yes, it comes down to accessible fonts as well, and accessible design is all about, sometimes it does need to be simple and maybe it's boring, but it's legible and readable. That's more important than something that's fancy and branded. The cool thing that we're working on is these scalable vector graphics can actually do a lot of different things, so that you can finally stop saying, well, it has to be boring and ugly on your website. Now, captions are a different thing. Obviously, the captions go with video. That is something that shouldn't be touched with at all. It should always be in the same format and synced up with what they say and everything else. That's obviously something that should be as accessible as possible. One of the things that people don't realize is now that we can change any vector-based graphic into this format, we can really make these graphics really accessible. In fact, way more accessible than just having an alternative text. So it's something that's kind of exciting to finally push the bar on graphics, to make sure that there's something more we can do than just add a description. And this is something that I'm really excited to share with the community.
Yeah, I'm excited to see that too. And in fact, I'm looking forward to your book, even though it's not for people like me. I'm not a designer and I'm not a developer, but I'll be pushing for people in those communities to buy that book, because it's going to be necessary. So
So I'm going to put it up on, my goal, put it up on Amazon and then share with you can follow us, and find me on LinkedIn so that you can tell when we're going to be publicly announcing the book release. Again, we keep adding new things to it because it's one of those things where the technology keeps evolving, and we really wanted our chapter on what we do specifically to have been done so well that it's really accurate when it does go to print, because browsers keep changing and assistive technology and their software gets updated. And so a lot of that's affecting how we design the graphics and the code behind the scenes to work with today's technology.
Yeah, I think you're going to have like many editions after that. Like first, second, third, fourth, fifth editions after that. So once you
this would be just volume 1. Yeah. We're a developer's guide as well. It's a separate system that we have, which is how to do what we do down to the nitty gritty, which is for engineers. It's a very technical guide. It's a developer's guide that is part of our licensing agreement that comes with all of our verified and tested code. It comes with a certificate program and videos and resources so that any type of enterprise level company could learn how we did this, which took us 2 years to figure out some of the stuff. We've actually invented a different way that has never been done before to change these graphics so that they can turn into any color and stay animated at the same time. It's extremely complicated. I'm not going to lie, because you're taking code from Illustrator. You have to clean it up. Then you have to know what you're doing to engineer these. And then you have to make sure it's working with different browsers and assistive technologies. So the process is tricky. It did take us years to figure this out because it's all over the internet. You can start researching it. A lot of this is public knowledge, but to find out what's working today with today's technology, it did take us quite some time to really create a new book, a developer's guide, in tandem with our graphic design book, because the two of them really go hand in hand, which is start with the designers and then end with the engineering. And that's something that's a little bit hard to do if you don't have good information.
Right. So I have the information in the post below, in the LinkedIn post, where people can get in touch with you, the website and the LinkedIn profile. So hopefully people watching will check out Heather's profile. And I just want to say hi to some people that dropped by. Hi, Robert. How are you doing? Happy New Year to you. Thank you for joining us this morning. And Mikos, I hope I said your name right. Hi. Hello, thank you for dropping in from Uganda. I hope you're having a lovely day. And so I just want to ask you the next question, Heather. So not only do you provide accessible graphics to companies, but you also push this digital sustainability. You touched on this a bit earlier, but what does this mean, and how can companies start incorporating this into their design process?
Yeah, so that's something I'm really passionate about. I am, of course, as a disabled user, really into accessibility, but this is an audience that's probably into accessibility as well. I didn't realize until I had a podcast that our graphics, because they're about 10 kilobytes, are really small. And that optimization really actually helps with many different things, of course, within the accessibility community, because if you have lower bandwidth, if you happen to live in a rural area, or you don't have access except for on your phone, these are things that make the experience much more accessible to many, many people who might not have better resources, for example. And, the disabled community usually is proportionately has, less finances in the rural area as well. So when we're talking about digital carbon footprints, what makes a bigger footprint, which is to use more energy. So when we started really looking into dark mode and researching the science behind what's going on here, the original computers were in dark mode because, and only because, they didn't have enough energy to actually produce a bright white screen. So the original computers were dark on purpose. They just didn't have enough power. So as you can imagine, when you're looking at a white website or white monitor, it's like staring into a lamp. It is glowing, right? There's a lot more energy being used to produce that bright light. So there's a bunch of things that come from that, which is, again, using more energy, right? So if you are allowing the website that you design, your apps, to allow to be in dark mode, which is having a dark theme, which is what it's called, is that your developers need to install a way for the browser to know that you are in dark mode and you want dark mode. You would serve up the dark mode website instantly. And that dark mode website can't just be flipped from what you have. It really needs to be thought through. There's a lot of issues with people just saying, well, it can just be black and white, well, flip it, flip it. But there's issues sometimes with a dark background that you have to be very careful about, not having pure black with pure white text, because a lot of times that will actually something called halotation will happen. Whereas the text moves, it kind of becomes a little bit blurred, right? So there's some very specific ways that you need to actually design a dark theme, really consciously know what you're doing. So that's one big barrier that companies face, is like, well, we need to design the dark theme and we have a large website, and we have to make sure that everything, when we do change the themes, is going to look good and still stay compliant. And this is something that comes down to also utilizing APCA, or the Accessible Perception Contrast Algorithm, the APCA. This is new math that's actually upgrading today's WAG. I think it's 2.2 are coming into contrast ratios to be a little bit better math. In fact, a lot better math to calculate for dark mode, which is not something that you can do right now with the visual perception. So we're actually looking at using the future tools for WCAG 3.0 to make sure that our dark mode themes are actually very accurate, and going to give really good ratios to make stuff more readable and to make that dark mode a really great experience. And again, our graphics flip into dark mode. So we design the graphic to be in dark mode. So it's not just a flipped inverted color of the graphic. It's a beautiful graphic made to be in that environment. So there is some ways you need to pay attention to what you're designing, of course, to make sure that that dark theme looks really good and that you're offering up a better experience for most people. And this is something that if you do that and it was at scale, there's a lot of energy being saved by having everybody be in dark mode as well. Like, this is going to be less consumption being used on the grid, and things like cryptocurrencies and NFTs and everything that you can imagine, and the growing digital pollution that we have right now. If the internet was a country, it'd be the 7th largest polluter. So reducing your digital carbon footprints is something that I became super passionate about. And now I'm looking forward to making sure that people realize the bigger your files, the more bandwidth and the more download and the more data is being transferred. That's sucking a lot of energy and using a lot of energy. So using files like what we're doing is going to be important for reducing your digital carbon footprints, and also just really spreading the word about how dark mode can save up to 28% on average. It can be a lot more than that if you're in dark mode. So we highly encourage people to take a look at that. Again, up to 63% of your cell phone battery life. That's a lot, right? So I can only imagine if you're going on a night flight, it's really important to also not disturb your neighbor by having this glowing white iPad in front of you. But if they moved it into dark mode, it would save their battery and help their neighbor sleep. So we have to try to share this information to allow people to realize that there is, as a huge community, as the world, we can have all of these billion people, billions of people change over their devices, and how much energy could we save as a whole on the planet is a big deal.
Yes, I think that people don't make that connection, don't think about sustainability when they're online, And obviously it's something that it was new to me when I did a little bit of research on you before talking with you this morning. Wasn't aware of digital sustainability, and I kind of consider myself maybe familiar with the news, with what's going on out there in terms of digital trends, but is this a new thing that we're talking about, Heather? Digital sustainability, and not many people talk about this. Is it new?
It's new. It was new to me, to be honest. I wasn't really thinking about it, and now I stopped taking 85 pictures of the same sunset because I'm like, oh, geez, that's just going to sit on a server somewhere and eat up kilobytes. And now I'm really starting to think about it. Where a year ago I wasn't paying attention to how fast a website would load was actually course, about a user experience. That's what I'm paying attention to, but I wasn't thinking about the bandwidth and the data transfer and the servers. So this is something that's, I think, a conversation that needs to be had with every community who's doing any type of app or website or anything that has to do with digital presence, right? How do we reduce that, right? So some of the basic things we can do is stop taking 700 pictures of the same thing, or delete them before you put them up on your streaming server, for example. Simple like that would actually probably really reduce stuff. One of the kind of exciting things we're actually working on is that SVGs are a document type. They're not just an image type. In fact, we can actually call in other pixel-based images and audio. So we're pretty sure we might be able to make the first video made of SVGs that are completely interactive. They change color, they change into dark mode, they scale beautifully, they can have captions, you can hear it on a screen reader, and they're going to be a much smaller file size. So something like a 40 megabyte video could then be 40 kilobytes. And we're really excited about something to that effect, because that would be a huge reduction on the digital carbon footprints with all the explainer videos and other things that are based in the vector format.
Yeah, that is something to think about. So when you first start talking with the company about how you can help them, what is the first thing that you discuss with them? Is it the brand audit or the design?
Yeah. So first, of course, we say, what are your goals? Trying to figure out what the kind of sizing of the company is. We have an agency program for like branding and web development firms that don't have the bandwidth to learn all what we do and have the staff to really become experts in this. So we have two different ways of doing business with us. One is that we are a service-based program. You send us your vector artwork and we will process it and send it back to you as smart SVGs with instructions on how to install it. So we have one whole program for agencies that are just doing work for other people, designing logos, designing websites. They can just send us the work, and then they can mark it up 100%, right? So they have the ability to make money off our services as well. It's a partnership. It's called the Powered by Equivalent Design Agency Program. The other part that we do business with is with enterprise companies that are interested in learning how to do what we do internally and taking on an entire licensing agreement with all of our codes and our books and resources, and we train up their engineers so that they can do it internally, and then they can offer that as a service to their clients as well. So it's something we're trying to spread the technology in different ways, because we know that there's many different ways of doing business out there. And we always start with their logo. We say, put your money where your mouth is. You got to do your logo. Logos are important. They're an accessible feature of knowing where you are on the website. There is an explainer video that we have on our website that kind of backs up all of this to explain to anyone who doesn't understand anything I just said. But also we have a tech demo, which actually shows you how a lot of dark PNGs, usually a lot of logos sometimes have a dark transparent image. Put that in a standard contrast theme where a user would prefer dark mode. It actually strips away any type of background image, but also a lot of these dark images will completely disappear. So if you have a dark image as a PNG as your logo, you could go to the website, and in these contrast themes that help low vision and other people use, whatever colors they prefer, your logo could literally disappear. So we're really showing that as an example of how important the logo is to tell you where you are. And we're also making what's called a bookmark icon in your browser, or favicon, or favorites icon, to be smart as well. So that will change if you're in light mode or dark mode, which is actually a really important thing as well, to tell where you are in your browser tabs. Where are you, right? So this is something that these little icons and your logo are where we start. We make sure that you do that as a project with us, that we help convert your brand into, again, some different colors. We check your technology and your fonts to work with screen readers as well, to make sure that what you've chosen will work with some of these more advanced graphics that have the semantic HTML built into them. Again, we have text that's live text that you can grab with your cursor. You can actually, it's indexable by it's actually real text within the graphics. So that becomes a problem if you don't have a good font, right? So we make sure that your brand's going to work with our technology, and it's going to be as accessible as possible. And then we help remediate any issues that might come up to guide you through to make sure that your brand and all of your collateral and everything else that you've designed is going to be truly accessible. And we understand a lot of companies can't change colors, but what they can do is work on perhaps, body copy fonts they use on their website and so forth. So we are really going to help them make sure that their branding and their colors and their fonts and their logo, including their favorite icon, will be converted into a smart SVG to learn how to work with us, because there is, like, you have to put these media query mockups saying, well, what do you want it to look like on mobile? Do you want a different lockup of your logo on a mobile device, for example? So we have these ability to do different browsers on different windows, and they change sizes and they change colors. What do you want in the dark mode? What do you want when it turns into, like, you know, these different types of things that they can do, since they can be animated, right? Would you like to animate your logo? So there's a lot of questions that go into that very first project. And then we continue down the educational path, which is training them and giving them both avenues that we do business with. Also get the graphic design book, of course. And we want their designers to learn how to do everything from the beginning to be extremely accessible.
Okay, so Sebastian, hello, Sebastian, thanks for joining. She says she's never thought about logo, the insights into logo, and it's not common knowledge at all. That is true. So that's something that would require extra outreach to companies. What would you recommend to companies that maybe don't have the budget to make all of these changes? They want to make their website accessible, but say they don't have the budget to do all of it. What would you say are the most important things to focus on in the beginning? Would that be the branding?
Yeah, I would say that the basics. I mean, if you can get your contrast ratios for text to be 10:1, that doesn't cost you any money to change contrast ratios. I mean, it would take a little bit to change your CSS, but you know, that's minor changes that can make a huge difference for people just trying to read your text. Choose a text that's legible, right? Good readability. So it doesn't matter if it's a serif or a sans serif font. It just has to be a good, clear font. In fact, using the default website fonts like, you know, Verdana and Arial are not a bad thing. Why? If you see them more often, they become more accessible and people actually learn them, right? So having Times New Roman works. It also loads pretty much instantly because it's been loaded up by Google and it's a Google font, right? So these are things that we really want to focus on. And sometimes it's okay to go back to those default web fonts just because they are very accessible. So these are things that are free. They're fairly quick to do. This is something that can really help people. We do really encourage, of course, to do just check the contrast ratios for your graphics and to make sure that your logo is not pixelated. You know, really try to put an SVG logo in. Again, that's not hard. I was doing this years ago with someone who didn't have any background in accessibility. I was still using a scalable vector graphic that would enlarge when enlarged, and low vision users tend to magnify their content. So it's actually kind of crucial for most of your vector graphics to at least at the minimal be exported as an SVG and have your developers learn how to do that properly and put that in your website. So these are things that you can slowly put on your to-do list, which is to upgrade all of your graphics over the next, you know, go into the future. You don't want to necessarily go backwards in time. In fact, when we do an audit for our graphics, we tend to say, well, you got 10 million images. Let's do the most important ones. What are the most important ones? Again, your logo, because that really is important to know where you are, as well as, you know, it's important for your branding, of course, but infographics are a big deal. We focus a lot on infographics because they're usually terrible for low vision and blind users. Infographics are notoriously left out of the conversation. Like low vision and blind users are left out of the conversation. They usually get a type of alt text that says comparison chart, right? And they don't get to see the content inside the pixel-based images, right? So this is something that we are now translating that into code. So the graphics are beautiful. They scale up beautiful if you're enlarging your content, but the content inside the infographic is actual text. It's keyboard navigable, right? It's got HTML semantics in it, so you can jump around from H1 to H2 and listen to the infographic just like a sighted user would look around. And also we're trying to figure out how do we make that audio experience embedded into that right now. We're excited that we might be working on that this whole 2023. My goal is in 2024 to be able to have this audio experience for low vision users. And it's not going to be for every graphic. It's going to be for, like, you know, a museum that has some really important thing that you need to learn about. And we want to give that experience to them just by listening to the SVG in some type of app or on the website. And another kind of cool thing about SVGs is that because they're from Illustrator, they are ready to go to print. They're already high resolution. There's no resolution on it, so they can be instantly perfect for print. And there's a lot of different ways that you can utilize this type of format going to both your marketing materials and on your website at the same time.
Okay. Sebastian has a question. Maybe a simple checklist of the different components that a brand should look into on their websites to ensure they are accessibility compliant would be helpful. Yes.
Yeah, there is a ton of, yeah, there are plenty of resources out there. If you look for just the, basic WCAG or web content accessibility guidelines checklist, they will give you a guideline of how to do links properly. And if you look at the W3C online, again, I think it's w3c.org, I believe, they will have all of the laws with all of the recommendations that you need to meet. And if you look for any type of accessibility checklist, there's hundreds of them out there. There's also some really cool free tools. One of my favorites is the Chrome extensions for Stark. They actually have a really great tool where it will help you in, there's a plugin also for Adobe Illustrator, I believe. I think they're also in Photoshop, but they have a Chrome extension that will tell you right off the bat if the design that you're working on is going to have the compliancy that it needs for color contrast ratios. It actually has a typography checker. I believe it has an alt text generator, like helps you prompt a good alt text as well. So there's a lot of different tools already. You just need to Google them and find which one will work best for your whatever development stage you're in and what kind of designer you might be and what tools you're using.
That's an excellent suggestion, Heather, especially if okay. Why am I so shown that?
Yeah, specifically around brands, it's about colors and fonts. I mean, pay attention to the basics.
Yeah. For example, I'm using for our names. I am using a turquoise background with black text. Is that good color contrast there, or could it be improved?
Yeah, actually, it reminds me of a pretty standard contrast theme. Again, a contrast theme is right now only on a PC, on a desktop. But if you go into the accessibility settings on your PC, you can get into something called contrast themes, which used to be called high contrast themes because it used to be really talked about for low vision users who needed that really strong contrast. This aqua and black combination reminds me of a high contrast theme, which would be a default setting that they have. They have a bunch of different default ones, a theme they can choose, which would allow you to see, some of the standard ones that people tend to prefer, which would be a dark background. Again, it's really hard on low vision users to have bright lights. So they always want to have the dark background, but they need a lot of contrast. So one of the most common ones is actually a bright yellow or the bright aqua. So a lot of times people also choose white, but those are some of the standard contrast themes, is to have something like that aqua with the black. It's actually quite common that's a really visual, very high contrast enough that anyone can see that contrast. So it's actually kind of nice that this program is using it.
Well, that's actually my brand color is turquoise.
Oh, nice. That works.
I was hoping I could use it. Yeah. It's just a reflection of New Mexico where I live. Turquoise is one of our colors here in the state. And so.
Also, did you know that blue is the only color that everyone can see pretty accurately? It can vary from person to person, of course, but colorblind users tend to have what's called red-green color blindness. So they have an issue with seeing red and green. So there's a reason why our branding is also in blue, is that it's a color that everyone can perceive pretty accurately. Of course, there's many different types of colorblind people that can see only black and white, but blue is one of the colors that we lean into a lot of times with branding because it is so accurate for the most people.
I didn't know that, but now I know it. A lot of new things I learned today from you. So we're coming up on 50 minutes, Heather. So I wanted to thank you very much for joining me this morning you've given me a lot of food for thought, and I'm sure for many others who are watching this morning. So I just want to say thank you very much. And for anybody watching, you can find Heather's information in the post below, her website and her LinkedIn profile, and reach out to her if you're interested in making your website accessible and want to add accessible SVGs to your website, and just get in touch with Heather. And thank you everyone for joining. And what did Sebastian says, again, my past part of the assessment requirement.
Definitely.
Thanks. I did.
So
Okay.
you can find out about all of this on our website, which is www.equivalent.design. We have an explainer video, again, was for people who didn't understand any of the tech, but also we have a demo of the tech in action, which shows you exactly what we're talking about. So check that out. Reach out with any questions. I'd be honored to speak to anybody if they have any follow-up questions at any time.
Okay, that sounds great, Heather. And I've checked out your website and checked out the explainer video, and makes it all clear what SVGs actually do. So I was really happy to talk with you this morning. And in the meantime, have a great day, everyone. And I will see you next week with a surprise guest. Not a surprise, but you'll find out next week. So tune in and have a great week. In the meantime, bye.